White House trade advisor Peter Navarro seems to have lost the plot on Ukraine war, as he has now accused Prime Minister Narendra Modi of directly financing Russia's war in Ukraine by importing discounted oil from Moscow. In fact, in an exclusive interview on Bloomberg television, Navarro went as far as calling the conflict Modi's war, insisting that India's purchases are empowering the Kremlin's war machine while hurting the American economy. Now, viewers, Navarro argued that every US consumer, worker, taxpayer is paying the price for higher job losses and weaker wages to billions in aid for Ukraine. He even added that India can get 25% off tomorrow if it stops buying Russian oil and helps to feed the war machine. Now, viewers, this attack came on the heels of Donald Trump's administration's decision to double tariffs on Indian goods to 50%. This is the highest in Asia, targeting over half of India's exports to the United States, its biggest market. Now, when we talk about these tariffs, while electronics and pharmaceuticals have been spared for now, sectors such as textiles and jewelry will face the brunt, threatening millions of jobs in India's labor-intensive industries. In fact, Navarro dismissed New Delhi's defense of sovereignty as arrogant, saying, and I quote him here, that India, you're the biggest democracy in the world, act like one. However, of course, India has been hitting back against these kind of attacks, calling the tariffs imposed on New Delhi unfair, unjustified and unreasonable. In fact, officials point out that Russian oil is not sanctioned and that US allies initially did encourage India for these imports to stabilize global supplies. Now, for New Delhi, the discounted crude has been crucial in keeping domestic energy prices under control. But what Washington seems to be losing the plot here, with Trump making trade concessions conditional on India reducing its ties with Russia. Now, while India has emerged one of Moscow's key oil customers, remember, China still remains the largest buyer. Yet, Trump administration has adopted a softer line on Beijing amid its wider trade negotiations. Now, viewers, this selective approach, this hypocrisy, these double standards, essentially, they fueled criticism in India. Last week, in fact, Navarro also accused New Delhi of refinery and profiteering from Russia's war in Ukraine. Now, this dispute comes at a sensitive time, with Trump promising to end the Ukraine war but failing to deliver a breakthrough in these talks with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky as well. So this is the latest statement we're getting in on White House trade advisor calling Ukraine war Prime Minister Modi's war. Completely a bizarre statement. It seems like the White House has now lost its plot when it comes to imposing sanctions on New Delhi. First, it was about a trade deficit. It was about New Delhi not agreeing to give concessions to United States during trade negotiations. And now it has come to Ukraine war. They keep shifting the goalpost, and now one after the other, we see such kind of statements coming in from Donald Trump's administration, targeting New Delhi for its purchase of Russian oil. And now the latest statement has come by White House trade advisor Peter Navarro, who is called Ukraine war Prime Minister Modi's war. He insisted that Indian purchases of Russian oil is essentially what's empowering the Kremlin's war machine, and at the same time it's hurting the American economy. Navarro argued that every US consumer, worker, taxpayer, they're paying the price for higher job losses and weaker wages in billions, in fact, to aid the war in Ukraine. In fact, he also added that India can get 25% tariffs off if it stops buying Russian oil and stops helping the war machine in Ukraine. Now, remember, all of these statements, they come at a time when Donald Trump administration has imposed 50% tariff on Indian goods. This is the highest tariff to be imposed in Asia by the United States, and it targets over half of India's exports to the United States, its biggest market. In fact, when we talk about the details of these tariffs, while electronics and pharmaceuticals, they have been spared for now, sectors such as textiles and jewelry, they will face the brunt, threatening millions of jobs in India's labor-intensive industries. In fact, now my colleague Varghese Ibrahim is joining me on this story. Good morning, Varghese. Now, my question to you is, we have seen a series of such statements coming in from the Trump administration. So one question, is this really about Ukraine or about the US trying to pressure New Delhi into trade concessions? Because they keep shifting the goalpost here. First, it is about the trade deficit, that it's about the Ukraine war, and now Peter Navarro going ahead and calling Ukraine war Prime Minister Modi's war seems a bit bizarre.
Well, it seems to be quite a bizarre understanding of what is happening, because we do know that the United States as a country which has been, advocating Ukraine's stance in this Eastern European theater of war, that they themselves have not completely stopped any kind of trading with the Russians. It's not that the trade with Russians have reached zero when it comes to the kind of association or the kind of pressure they've been putting on other countries. And at the same time, back-channel talks are being carried out between the US and Russia over energy deals. So what is it all about? Why is it that they can have back-channel talks on energy deals when we are in fact going through what is called as a proper world trade? Is it not the fact that there are countries that go to war, and does it mean that their entire trading capacity is affected? They do sell their goods and services and in the international open market, and it is brought by other countries. So what is it that the US finds something reluctant about this? Let me explain another thing. There are European countries that have taken defense shells, those ammunition from Indian agencies and Indian defense companies, and they have bought it for themselves. They have transferred this to Ukraine and has been used against the Russians. Now, does that mean that India is responsible for funding the European ammunitions that are being used against Russians? No, they have bought it at a different timeline. They have bought those ammunition from India. They've parked it for their military usage, and now they have transferred it to Ukraine. The Ukrainians are using in the war against Russian. That does not make it India's war, does it? Does it make it, are we involved on the other side then if we go by the same tactic of explanation that Peter Navarro is giving? On the other side, how is it that we are financing this war? We are just going by global trade policies, and we are just going by the fact that we will look for the best interest of our country when it comes to oil supply. That is historically how nations in fact go. They go for their self-interest first. But that does not mean that we are financing the Ukrainian war. Prime Minister Modi was one of the first world leaders to, in fact, say that this is not an era of war. And that was blatantly told to India's close friend, Russia. Now, if Peter Navarro does not understand that part of it on how independent India's policy is about, you cannot go ahead and say that we are responsible for a war that your country has started. Historically, NATO has been pushing its boundaries towards Russia, and we all know that the Ukrainian conflict started with the possibility of a NATO membership for Ukraine. So you have triggered Russia into a war. How is it our war? Because there is some money involved in it that it becomes our war? It is a war that the United States have been initiating, and its genesis doesn't lie in 3 years ago or 4 years ago. The genesis lies with the fact that this was a continuation of the Cold War that they've been having with the Russians from the time of the Soviet Union and after its collapse as well. Putin has been saying that all you require is not to have NATO at its doorsteps, and you had tried to get NATO at its doorsteps, and of course Russia is now reacting on it. Ukraine got caught in it. Ukraine had revolutions in it within its political structures. Before Zelensky came, someone was already elected. That person had to, in fact, resign down because of the revolution. So there was internal political turmoil that led to Zelensky's rise. And later this war happened because there was more attempt to bring Ukraine within the Western fold, especially under a NATO protection. Now, the big question over here is that whose war is it anyway? We are talking about trade as an aspect of international global network system, and in that trade, goods and services are available. Nobody is funding anybody's war. In that case, we must understand that the United States over the years have been funding several rebel groups, several dictatorships that are known for horrendous crimes against humanity, several wars that they have initiated, they have brought to the Middle East and destabilized it. So in that case, are we saying that we are putting the blame on you? And at the same time, they have been trading with countries that have had historical problems with their own population when it comes to human rights violations. So if that doesn't work for the US, why be sanctimonious on Ukraine?
Right, so clearly some history lessons are needed there. Let's put it for our viewers here. The fact that Europe continues to trade with Russia, you have United States trading with Russia. In fact, under Donald Trump, the trade has increased by 20% as was mentioned by the Russian president. And now still it continues to, engage with Russia on trade deals. So why is India getting blamed here? That's the real question. And I want to ask you on that point, do you think the fact that India did not let Donald Trump take the credit for India-Pakistan ceasefire, as he has been claiming for over 40 times now, do you think that has anything to do with the kind of frustration we're now seeing?
Well, I do not know whether Donald Trump is in fact quite angry about that part of the argument, whether that he's the one who brought peace, leveraging trade, as he said in many of his statements that he's been making regarding how the cessation of hostilities between India and Pakistan took place. But one thing is for certain, the US does not know what it wants from India. Either you're talking about Russian oil purchases or you're talking about high tariffs and probably even this credit on India-Pakistan conflict itself. Now, the question that you should be asking is, what is it that you really want? Are you talking about tariffs? Why is tariffs mixed with Russian oil purchases? Because in that case, you have not, in fact, brought your trading ties with Russia to a zero. You do get fertilizers, you do import uranium, and even tungsten, which is very important, and titanium as well. Russia has one of the highest titanium deposits. These imports are still going on. So who are you trying to fool saying that India is the only country that is going ahead with purchase of Russian oil? We are not the largest purchasers of Russian oil. China is. A 19 trillion economy is purchasing Russian oil. Your 23 trillion economy is dependent on that 19 trillion economy at any cost. So you don't have that ability to go for a complete sanctions on China. What this could lead in the future is this, that the carefully attempted efforts of previous US presidents to have good ties with India over the last 25 to 30 years is being jeopardized because of one man. Now, Republican as well as Democrat presidents have been trying to have a trading relationship with India, understanding India's position, and at the same time for deeper economic impact between both the countries. They've been, in fact, removing a lot of tariffs. They have been, in fact, going for deeper US industries coming into India, especially when it comes to dual-use technologies. They've been doing all that. You had a Republican president like Bush going in for the 1-2-3 agreement on nuclear reactors. You have Clinton, in fact, going ahead for military-to-military contacts. So all these US presidents have been trying to build a relationship with, and Trump comes all the way from nowhere and thinks that it's about dealing and trade. International relations doesn't work like how a businessman thinks. It's not just deals. It has got historical context, it's got geopolitical context, it has got several other factors that have to be weighed in. It cannot be from the viewpoint of a single prism where it says it's all about deals. And Trump is not acting like the president of the United States, who needs to have statesmanship, understanding of geopolitical reasoning and history as well. He's completely misinformed most of the times. And in that case, he takes abrupt decisions like this. What has this happened? The Quad has been weakened. The Quad, an organization that has been brought with loosely bound by countries that have concerns about China's rise. The Quad has been weakened, and India has been forced into China's orbit thanks to these policies, because now RIC could become a real economic giant. You're talking about Russia, China, and India all having contiguous land borders, if you look at the world map, and the possibility of high industrialization, especially as Russia is looking to exploit its resources in Siberia, China having the factories, and India having the ports that could actually get these products straight to Africa, to Southeast Asia, and at the same time, it could have a connect towards Europe and Middle East as well. So RIC is going to become a huge reality, and it could become an economic giant with two most populous nations of the world. Of course, talking about the largest markets in the world in that case, coming together, and with Russia being part of it, giving access to Europe, this could become a reality thanks to the short-sightedness and myopic view of Donald Trump.